And thank you, BIC, for giving in to my nagging to do something special for Daan Utsav. And the idea for me was really to explore, because I know social entrepreneurs and I know people who start up NGOs and I know the struggles they face, the challenges they face, but also the exhilaration that they feel. So really, I wanted to, and I also saw that they came from very different motivations. You know, some came because their heart told them to. It was a personal experience. It was something from inside, maybe. Some came because it was an external stimulus. So, you know, there are various types of people who enter this and make it their life and dedicate their lives to it. So really, I was interested that we kind of have this conversation around motivations and then what keeps them going. Entering is one thing, easy enough, but they still stick to it and they go on and dedicate their lives. So, you know, exploring the start and the journey was really the purpose. And we have this most amazing panel today, very diverse. And, you know, we have Harish, who is a Magsaysay award-winning pride, one of the original, I think, the definition of social entrepreneurship in India. He's a co-founder of Celco, which is about solar energy in the hands of the poor. We have Chithra, who is a co-founder of Aishwarya Trust, which works with children with congenital heart disease. So she, in the last 15 years or so, has screened about 2 lakh children and facilitated surgeries for over 6,000 of the poorest. Essentially works in Tamil Nadu, but also has operations here. And we have a very interesting third person who, I mean, we have a gender diverse panel, but we, you know, Vikram of BIC suggested we also bring in a young person. And we have Meghana, who also works on a very different kind of area. So here we have solar energy, we have health, and we have Meghana, who is a founder of Trust in. This provides technology solutions, a SaaS-based solution, end-to-end, for handling POSH, that is prevention of sexual harassment cases, within corporate. So that's a completely different and very new age, you know, tech solution for what we see as a, you know, gender issue or a problem. And to facilitate this wonderful panel of 3, we have Vishal, who is a co-founder of Dream a Dream, which works on life skills for youth. Their work has touched close to 9 lakh children, providing life skills training and getting them up to be able to meet the challenges and take, you know, kind of advantage of the opportunities that life offers. So with this, I will hand over to Vishal, and I'm looking forward to a very stimulating conversation. Thank you. May I invite the panel?
That's it here. Thank you, Meena and BIC, and thank you to my co-panelists for accepting the invitation to be here. Why don't some of you come forward so we can have a more intimate conversation? If it was not getting recorded, I would have changed the setup to a more circular setup, but let's definitely come closer. Thank you. So before we kind of really start listening to the stories here, I thought let's get a sense of who's in the audience. So how many of you have had to travel for 30 minutes or more to reach here? You see, I didn't use kilometers, right? Okay. Wow. With Bangalore, you always have to measure time with the amount of time it takes. How many of you are associated with the social sector in any way? Okay, a few of us. Great, great. And how many of you run your own organizations or have been part of social sector organizations as? Yes, okay, great. So we have quite an interesting mix of people. How many of you are family members of the panelists here? Yeah, friends and family. There we go. So, no, we always need that support. Right? So thank you for being here today. I'm sure we'll go into each of the stories. But my first question, maybe I'll start with you, Meghana. It's not so much about why you started Trust In, but what was the context in which you felt the need for a Trust In to exist?
Okay, I can go first. Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the question, Vishal. I think this is a question I get a lot because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a technologist, and I'm running a legal tech company, right? And it's something only lawyers have. They love calling other people non-lawyers, so I get that once a day. I think to what Meena was saying, right? Yes, there is a mix of head, heart, and hand that comes in when you start something like this. I think it's also the internal and external motivations have to collide, which is what happened for me, because I think I had gone through several toxic workplaces. I think it was always verbal harassment, so it was difficult for me to understand what was going on until after the fact, right? But I think I did hit a breaking point at one of those places, and I tried to report the CEO, right, for sexual harassment, and it was like textbook. Immediately it was, he's never been that way with me, are you sure? It was a lot of, he is such a great person and he has done so much. And this is a very powerful person, right? And I think I was basically shown the door within like 2 weeks. And this was early 2018, right? So of course, in the beginning, the trauma response was very strong. I felt very sorry for myself. But after a while, I started getting quite angry. It felt like somebody with my good intentions and my privilege, if I am not bulletproof, then who is, I started asking a lot of friends. I started offering to buy people coffee in third wave if they would share their stories with me anonymously. And it seemed that everybody had a story or they knew somebody who had a story. And I started realizing it was a much bigger problem. So this became my side project, right? It was really because I felt that in the global south, especially, it's almost like destiny. You get a good manager, you're sorted. You have a bad manager, it's the luck of the draw, right? At most, you can quit your job, but you can never ask for justice. You cannot ask for safety, right? And then that's when the Me Too movement hit India in a big way. Right? So 6 months, I was just doing this on the side. I was working in a VC firm. I think that was also lucky because I learned how to build a company, how to build a product, right? I started building a WhatsApp chatbot. But then when the Me Too movement hit India is when I really saw how tech could solve this problem, because I saw so many brave journalists who were naming and shaming perpetrators, and they were keeping the victims anonymous. But then now those journalists are still unable to get jobs simply because they tried to stand up for what was right. In countries like China, women were actually embroidering their stories of sexual harassment in Hello Kitty stockings because they wanted to tell the world what was happening, but they were that scared, right? So I started feeling that there has to be more dignity of labor, there has to be more value to our workplace experience than just something on the side, right? And 2018 is when a lot of people started asking me, is this a real product? It wasn't a real product then, but we hacked it overnight, and that's how we started getting clients. I think once we had 5 clients, I always call myself a very accidental entrepreneur for that reason, right? I realized that this was something bigger, it was taking off, the headwinds were there, so that's really how Trust In came into existence.
So your response was really to, a personal gap that you saw in your own experience working in different places, and second, what you were seeing happening around you in the world. Wow, thank you for sharing that. Harish, let me come to you. You've been in the space for 30 odd years. So what was the context for which Celco needed to exist when it started? And what is the context that it needs to still exist today after 30 years?
I don't know. The question is, I still don't have an answer to that, Vishal. Okay, frankly speaking, and I don't have a different background to it. And I guess it started off as an experiment, and I know how many people know Celco has 2 parts to it. The foundation came. We started with a social. The longest standing is a social enterprise, which is 30 years old, and it's a company which is owned by 3 not-for-profits. and the profits are never given out to anybody else. That time Section 8 or 70 did not exist. So, but it's 3, and then the 20% of the profits is given to the least earning 40% of the employees. And 20% of the profits is then kept aside for emergency if the parents die, child's education, somebody's house gets destroyed. And the rest, 60% goes back to the organization. And that's been it's been profitable for the last 17 years, and no profits has ever been given out to the 3 shareholders who are the not-for-profits. So that's been, and then Celco Foundation started in 2010 with the frustration that, with the frustration you said, been there 30 years, I've got a lot of awards because I speak English. I was telling you, non-English speakers in our country have no chance. And that's why the Celco Foundation was created to push those buttons, saying that how can this country succeed if the vernacular speakers are not created a platform for innovation. So to start Celco was saying, see, I went to IIT because 300 million Indians did not write the exam. Right? If they had written the exam, I would not have gone into IIT. I was paid by the poor who bought salt and sugar. The taxes paid my education in IIT. So I went to US on a scholarship. My father never paid electricity because he was Steel Authority of India. So I'm a product of subsidy in front of you. And then I turn around and say market economics just doesn't make sense. But so my original stakeholders are the poor of this country who paid for everything that I've done, right? So Celco was created saying that how do we create a platform where the stakeholders, that is the poor, become the owners of the organization, the owners of the concept, solution providers, and not beneficiaries, but not even partners, but conceptually as part of the organization itself. And so out of the 650 people in the Celco India, the for-profit social enterprise, 648 of them come from the sector. A couple of them only in the finance department who have a so-called degrees or whatever. And that's when it was most out of, isn't that what we should be doing in the first place? So I would ask the other people, why have you joined corporates? So when people say social enterprise, does it mean others are anti-social enterprises? This should be the enterprise, right? Why are we giving this a separate status? The others are anti-social. So this is how it should be in the first place, right? And that's, so I would say that's what.
So behind these choices that you have made over these last 30 years, there are certain values that are driving it. What are some of those values, and how do those values came into your being?
But anyway, so one is, the values is that, as I was telling Mila, we were there yesterday together, if all of us did a PhD on sugarcane, we'll all be called an expert of sugarcane. A farmer doing 40 years of sugarcane will never be called an expert because he or she has a PhD. I will be sitting on the panel, he'll be sitting downstairs, and I will be advising him how sugarcane has to be grown. This racism of education, right? So the value of Celco is that we don't take resumes, we don't take degrees. None of us have in our visiting cards the title nor the degrees where you have graduated from. You might be even reporting to somebody, like we have 2 MIT grads who report to a 10th grade dropout in the organization. And that has been done for 18 years. It's not like it's a romanticism, something has happened. How do you equalize it in the real fashion? How can, for example, I left Celco India in 2013 and joined the foundation. But my colleague who joined as an office assistant is the CEO, who is unfortunately more known in the US than here. He'll never be called for panels here because he doesn't speak English. But when he speaks Kannada, the Swamijis will not speak because his purity of Kannada is so high. And he's the only guy in the world who made a for-profit solar company profitable during COVID, but will never be called for panels. Right? That's the racism I see. And that's the philosophy of Celco, is how do you break that racism of that language barrier, which is when Mohan Hegde is the only guy in the world who made it. Brilliant Yakshagana artist. CEO of organization of 650 people, will never be invited in India.
I'm going to
Even if you Google him, you will not find him, and nobody will order. I will Harish chahiye. That's my guiltiness. Boss, I take all the credit. It's Mohan who has built Celco. Huda who built Celco Foundation. Right? This glorification is what Celco wanted to destroy in many ways. This glorification of... And the social sector is the worst. It's the worst of glorification of English-speaking crowd and how people do PowerPoints and Excel rather than the true value of work. We are the worst, actually. We might say the others are not doing it, the corporate sector. We are really worst.
I'm going to come back to you to unpack that a little bit more. So thank you for sharing that. Chithra, I know for you it was a deeply personal reason. But how did that reason then become a cause for you that you then started developing over the last 15 years?
Yeah, my journey is very different from my panelists, and I'm like you said rightly, mine is a very personal journey. So I founded Aishwarya Trust in 2008 in memory of my daughter Aishwarya. She was born with a congenital heart disease, and we gave her the best possible treatment. But unfortunately for us, we lost her. And, for me, the cause was always very close to my heart. And on one of the casual conversations that I was having with my Dr. K.R. Balakrishnan, who is a pediatric cardiac surgeon, renowned surgeon in India, he was telling me about how thousands of children couldn't be treated because of lack of funds. And he was asking me if we can start say a small trust, or we can bring in some money so that we can make these surgeries affordable for the parents, because congenital heart disease is actually basically like a mechanical defect in the heart, and with early detection and treatment, the child can lead a normal life. So when he said that, I just felt that this is my calling and I need to do something. But my background is very different. I'm an artist by profession, and I didn't know the first thing to start an NGO. But I think the need to do this was so strong in me that I approached my father and I checked with him, can we start something with your support? So he agreed immediately, and K. Nagarajan, he's the founder of my NGO. So we just registered the NGO, and from my art business, I started with 11,001 rupees from my art business, and the rest, I must say, is history. So I think the loss had become the reason for me to want to do this very badly, and that's why I started this.
Thank you for sharing that, and sorry for the loss that you had to experience to kind of find your calling in this work. I think something that in my own experience also. So one is to have that very personal experience with someone that's close to you. And then when you start something, you start seeing the complexity of the issue itself. So what did you discover as you started this work about the complexity of the challenge that you were trying to address?
Yeah, the first thing I realized was, it's not easy to raise funds. A lot of people also discouraged me. They said, do you know what you're getting into? Because this is, you have to raise a lot of funding, and how many children do you think you are going to able to save? So my question, I was very clear. I said, doesn't matter even if I save 1 or 2 lives, that's very big for me. So I just have to do it. And then I went to, people who have been running NGOs, etc., to just get some ideas. And they said there is no other way but to go with a begging bowl, literally, to people to, raise the money. So to answer your question, the first few years was a big struggle. Only my family family and friends came forward. My father, my husband, and my family supported me, and we started off. And every time there were children admitted in the hospital, and my doctors would ask me, we need to do the surgery, I'd say, just go ahead, we'll somehow find the funds. And I must say, there is a divine hand, and somehow I would get the funds from somewhere. There have been a lot of people who are involved in this, and so many people came forward, and somehow we saw through the first couple of years. And then the mandatory CSR started in India, and that was a big breakthrough for me. And by then we had also a track record of some good work. So many of the corporates approached us, and they fund us through the CSR program. So fundraising was the main issue at that moment, because I have a great panel of doctors who with whom I've been working for the past 15 years. So they also are volunteering this work, I have very little overheads because I have a lot of volunteers who help me. So these were the initial challenges, but I must say that we have been able to form a very good program, a comprehensive program where we have screening, diagnosis, treatment, and review of children. And we are one of the better pediatric programs in all of India.
I'm going to just go a little bit deeper in your work itself. So one was fundraising, of course, that's key to building an organization. But in terms of the challenges of that the children were facing, so were you treating children from all backgrounds? What were you recognizing about the challenge that the children with this defect itself were facing, and what were some of the possible stigmas or challenges that the families were facing because the children had this defect?
Yeah, so we only treat the children who are whose parents just cannot afford it, so they are below the poverty line. So how we screen this is Tamil Nadu health insurance scheme is available, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister scheme. So through that, you can apply for the insurance, and to apply for the insurance, you have to, have certain paperwork, etc. So these, there is a central government scheme called the Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karikram. So we work along with the Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karikram in our program, and so they reach out to the primary health centers in the villages. So many children, like you rightly said, the parents are not even aware that the child has a congenital heart disease. But the primary health centers, doctors, when they screen and they see the symptoms of blue babies and, poor feeding and poor weight gain, etc. So they come to our screening program. So, and then they are diagnosed, and, when you said challenges, it's ironic that, a lot of these children who have been diagnosed with a heart disease, many of the fathers just abandon the children and run away because they know that it's going to be a big ordeal for them to raise the money and look after. So we see mothers and grandmothers bringing these children to us, and so our doctors have to first explain the whole problem to them, and they have to counsel them. Many of them don't want to give the children treatment. They are very afraid. So the first thing is to get them to come to our centers, and then we screen them, and then we handhold them to avail of the Tamil Nadu insurance scheme. And we have Our partner hospitals also highly subsidize the costs for us. So, we are able to help these children, and these children from very underprivileged backgrounds are able to get the best available treatment in the country in our private hospitals.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chithra. Meghana, let me come to you. So tell us a little bit about the work itself, and you chose to design your organization as a for-profit enterprise. So what was the reason behind making that choice, and what is the work that you actually do on the ground?
Okay, I can answer the second question first. I have spent a lot of my career in nonprofits. Most of my time was at Teach for India. And I think there's fantastic work that a lot of nonprofits and civil society bodies are doing. But I always found that in many ways there was a struggle for survival, right? There's always going to be a lot of grants. There's almost like a separate arm for fundraising, grant funding. So I felt that the way that I wanted to structure Trustin, it should be able to become financially sustainable, because that would take a huge load off my chest, right? As a solo founder, I didn't want to worry about that. So it was very selfish reasons, to be honest. But the second thing is also because I was working in a venture capital firm at that time, I knew there was no way that if a funder says jump, I don't want to say how high. I would rather do that with the clients, right? So it was very clear to me that it had to be a bootstrapped, for-profit startup. Like I said, we really did chance into this, because after the Me Too movement in India, there was a lot of interest. There was almost paranoia around, we have to do this right. In India, I think we are very lucky that we have the prevention of sexual harassment law, because it's very unique, it's very comprehensive, it's very prescriptive. There is nothing like it in the world right now, right? It came out in 2013, and it's been 10 years now. Most of our clients right now are, social enterprises, so they need it for FCRA renewal, or they are small, startups. And usually I like to go for non-male co-founders, because I know that then it's not just going to be a checklist compliance. It's going to be part of your culture, right? That's important. And if you're a startup, you need to have POSH done really well, because it also goes back to your VC due diligence, right? So I think we're very lucky that, one, this law exists, and two, that's also tied to the bottom line, because in the end, that is very important, right? Good intentions, vision, mission, yes, all of these matter, but I think if this FCRA and VC due diligence was not there, it would be a little more difficult for us to get the buy-in. So we started out as a product. So it really was, if you have a committee in place which takes care of your POSH complaints, we will just come in with a product. So now your employees, let's say at Celco Foundation, they have a question like, am I being sexually harassed, right? Am I being bullied? Who do I complain to? Because many times if I go and complain to my manager or the human resources department, it just gets swept under the rug. I'm not advised that, hey, you need to put this in writing. Hey, you need to send it to the ethics committee, POSH committee, right? It just goes into the ether. And that caused a lot of frustration, because I tried to speak up, but what happened? So I can go and talk anonymously to the Trustin chatbot. I can understand, through cartoons, things like that, okay, was this actually sexual harassment? Yes. Then I can log into the system in a very trauma-informed way. I can report my case. So I can include things like screenshots of messages, emails, if I have things like CCTV footage, attendance logs, I can just mention that. And then it goes directly to the POSH committee. So in the beginning, this is all we were. We were a B2B, like business to business, software as a service. It has a chatbot, it has a case reporting system. Your committee will also learn what to do and when, because in the end, your committee, it's a civil court, right? It's almost like the panchayat of your company. So you're asking non-lawyers to do a very complicated legal process, which is why when a POSH complaint comes, even the committee freaks out. If it's the first case, they have no idea what to do. And POSH law has just said 7 steps. Okay, in 3 months, please do these 7 steps. But what we realized is that wasn't enough. We have actually broken it down to 85 sub-steps, because we understand also that POSH is nobody's full-time job. So it'll be like, okay, fine, hey, for this case, you have to do this today, do this meeting, ask this email, things like that, right? So now you're making sure that it's almost like a positive forcing function, where you're making sure that this is completely compliant. We are making sure that all the steps are followed. Sometimes they have gone to appeals in court as well, some of our cases. So now there's a timestamp body of proof that actually, hey, as a company, we did everything right. There's a case diary that gets stored. So first, it was only the product. But then what we started realizing, because I always felt that, okay, fine, there are enough people doing training. So maybe everybody's aware of their rights, So the access was the problem, is the hypothesis I started with. But I think we also are only 4 years old, so most of our life has been during a pandemic, right? I don't know if we can say we're out of it yet. So in 2020, like people were calling me, and they were in these companies that were doing trainings all the time, sensitization sessions. They were like, Meghna, my manager called me at 2 a.m. I'm like, okay. They're like on WhatsApp video call. I'm like, fine. They're like, show me your bedroom, show me what you're wearing. It's like, okay. They're like, is this sexual harassment? I was like, yes, right? And I was like, why are there so many of these questions, right? And then I started realizing that actually the awareness is also very low. Like our understanding of what is appropriate, inappropriate behavior, what is a boundary, what is consent is very nascent. It's very evolving. And a lot of the programs that were in place at that time were very letter of the law, right? If you're sexually harassed, do this, and this will happen. But then people were not even able to understand, am I being sexually harassed? It is a very insidious thing. I think we have to understand that predators evolve with their prey. So now I don't think anybody is grabbing anybody. I mean, of course it happens, unfortunately, but you know what I'm saying? It's a lot more mind games, right? We always say sexual harassment is not about sex, it's about power. And it's about exploitation of that power differential between two individuals, two groups. It is definitely happening. It's happening everywhere. It just looks very different, right? But it's definitely having the same kind of impact where a person is mentally disturbed, they are not able to perform, it's a hostile environment, and many times they exit, right? So I think that's when we also evolved a program, because we said that now we need to also train people to understand some of these nuances. There need to be real-life case studies, right? And I think we got a very enthusiastic response once we added a program to the product, right? People were like, this is the first posh training that hasn't been boring. Usually I just take a nap with my eyes open, So I think we got good feedback. We started making sure that every year, a very small thing, the POSH law says every year you need to sensitize your training, but unfortunately the same training would be done year on year, right? So what we started doing is different modules, keeping it very, interactive, things like that. Finally, I think even policies, right? So again, a lot of the policies were full of legalese that a lot of people could not understand. When things are going wrong, I don't actually understand what this paper is telling me and what are my rights and what do I do next. So we also finally, we call the 3 Ps, right? Product, program, and now policy as well. So we work with lawyers who make your policies gender neutral. We work with lawyers who make sure your policies are very contextual. And I think we're the only ones who put like colorful visuals everywhere so that people can just understand as a flow chart. If I am already traumatized and if I'm having so many questions, the last thing I need is a lot of information that I don't understand. So all of these things, right now we work with about 60 clients across India. I think for a while we were infamous with this model because people were almost saying that, if you use trust in, you will have sexual harassment cases. It's like, correlation is not causation, right? I think we were very lucky that our clients saw it as a good thing because I was like, now they're aware of their rights and they also have trust in the company and the committee to do the right thing, which is big. Right? You don't want it to go to social media tomorrow, or you don't want to lose your best talent because they're feeling unsafe. But I think the first 2 years were difficult because we had to sort of shed that reputation, and I think after that it became much easier.
And did the emergence of the Me Too movement in India, did that support this journey for you as an entrepreneur? Or was it more of a, did it create more resistance for this work?
Yes, I think I would definitely say Me Too created a lot more awareness and a lot more action, right, around this area. There was more conversation. It was no longer a big taboo. But I would honestly say, yes, the timing was right because that's when people started reaching out to me, people who had worked with me, and they knew I was building something. They were like, is it a real product? Can we use it? Things like that. They were so overwhelmed, right? They were getting so many cases. But I would actually say the biggest tailwind, again, was the tying of FCRA and the venture capital due diligence to POSH compliance, right? Because what I feel that a lot of the Me Too pushback did, the pushback was swift and it was everywhere. People were suddenly like, I don't want to deal with my women subordinates. I might get slapped with a false case. Even now, no matter how many trainings I do, somebody will be waiting to ask me the question, what about false cases, right? So I think there is definitely a lot of fear around this. There's a lot of misunderstandings around it. So I would say in some ways, the Me Too movement in the beginning, yes, was a helpful tailwind. But over time, I think it's because of due diligence and compliance that we're able to go forward.
Fantastic. So Harish, for the people here who don't know, maybe you could tell a little bit about Celco itself, the enterprise and the foundation. What do you focus on? And then I have a different question for you.
So Celco, the for-profit actually is as I said, it's owned by 3 foundations. It has 660 offices, 600 people. It basically provides energy solutions using solar as a catalyst for end users, mostly in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and parts of Maharashtra, using third-party finance like the regional rural banks. And so our client base is mostly the slum dwellers or the local farmers, blacksmiths, barber shops, and individual households. Celco Foundation was much created to saying that who creates the ecosystem. And the biggest subsidy, for example, Google got is the internet. Google did not pay for the internet, right? Who creates the ecosystem for a Ghasi-speaking entrepreneur to succeed? Or who looks at, suppose I do a solar-powered sewing machine and everybody writes it, instead of 2 shirts, you do 8 shirts. But nobody asks the question, where will she sell the extra 6 shirts? Does she have the market linkage to sell it? Then only the solar-powered sewing machine actually makes sense. How do you create the financing to it? I mean, who puts that ecosystem? That's the equivalent of internet analogies, right? And then how can a roti rolling maker or a blacksmithy, for example, take a loan from the bank? Who actually convinces the bank to create a product that actually matches the cash flow? Then that's one part. We also look at much of the livelihoods per se it's not gender like for example, blacksmith. For 250 years, nobody has innovated anything, right? It still is going on. Pottery making, nobody has touched it. Rice mill, for example, right? When one runs rice mill and if the power goes off, diesel has to be gone. Not only you need a man, you need a strong man to start the diesel engine, right? Drudgery. None of the innovations are women-centric at all, right? And nor it is in the courses of the IITs or anywhere. We might talk about gender-sensitive. None of the innovations or livelihoods are gender-centric in terms of how do you bring in a solar-powered pottery making machine, right? How do you make a solar-powered hammer mill? Suddenly you have women blacksmiths. How do you make a solar-powered rice mill? Suddenly switch on the lights and you actually start looking at it. So those are innovations that normal ecosystem will not pay for. A financial innovation that couples with a hammer will nobody pay for, right? What type of guarantee working capital will a Assamese-speaking entrepreneur get in rural Assam? Nobody's going to look at it. So Celco Foundation's focus is creating that ecosystem for anybody, as inclusive. Could be a tribal kid out of Hande or a Kannada speaker in Raichur. Yeah, so that's the fundamentals of both the organization, yeah.
So the foundation is building this ecosystem of support?
Northeast. Mostly Northeast, Odisha, Jharkhand. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't work in Celco, India, down south. Yeah. Much.
Okay. And the enterprise is then giving products and services? That's
in the south. Whatever lighting products it does, it wants to show that how a social enterprise could be successful and viable. So it's been profitable from 2006. And it's been running, it grew from 150 people in 2006 and now it's 600 people. And the best part, it doesn't give dividends and it has its own cash flows and it has its own rules and regulations, yeah.
So one of the aspects that's very interesting about your own journey, Harish, is how your organization listens. And as I was also reading and going through some of your previous interviews and what you've just shared now, that you're understanding your customer in a whole different way. You're looking at the gender and seeing what's the challenge that I can address here. You're looking at the financial aspects of it. You're looking at the support system, the ecosystem around it. So was that something that was already in the ethos when you started the organization, or is it something that you built? And how do you continue to nurture that listening?
No, from day one it's been there. So the question is, from day one it's been the challenge. I tell you, it's the arrogance of education, right? It's like our education system is like, I'll come up with a solution and now let me try where the problem is, right? I'm not going to listen to somebody else's problem, right? And I'm going to tell him that he's my beneficiary, not my partner, right? The language of semantics itself is so spoilt in many ways, right? The challenge is the hiring process is for us is we have a bunch of 3 or 4 people who do an interview process of whether the person is Celco type at all or not. Don't tell me what is a Celco type. It's just a gut feeling. Does he or she have the common sense and have the ability to hear no 150 times a day? And have the patience to go through, call the ragging period or whatever. So then the second part of the interview is where do you come in? And we're not really worried about do you have the expertise, do you have experience, etc. That we will take care of inside the organization. But the fundamental principle is when we say that our test is that when you go to the auto rickshaw driver and the auto rickshaw driver has told you, sir, you have failed the test. How do we reach the level of the sugarcane farmer or a auto rickshaw driver or a street vendor that he or she is speaking to me on the table as one and one? That's the test that you have arrived. Moment if there is a difference between the two people, I'm sorry, you have not arrived, right? Where somebody at 1 o'clock in the night, a street vendor should be able to call you and say, I have an issue. Your light is not working. Why is that? That should be our response level in many ways, right? And that understanding is been the biggest challenge for me is when we interview, it's not the kids who come and join. It's the parents that I have a problem with. The parents come and say, oh, Celco, social thing, it should be, don't you think, working after 60? His cousin is earning a little more in the Infosys, blah, 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 etc. Then I start talking about the roads are not working, Bangalore traffic, and then suddenly start complaining about it. I said, exactly, the problem is you want Gandhi to be born in neighbor's house, not your house. Right? You don't want your kid to solve. The issue is there. The issue is we like to talk about it, but we don't want our kid to be. Our kid will go to the US. Right? When we blame the younger generation saying that they're in the cell phones, they don't know responsibility. At your house, if the kid doesn't behave, you blame the parents. If the younger generation does not behave, let's blame ourselves. And that is a challenge. How do you bring the end user centric thought process of respect, where you should be knowing the villa guard's name, not him doing the salam? When a street vendor tells you something little more, you say, are you cheating? When you go to Big Bazaar, you say it's expensive. The semantics that we use for the poor, who actually subsidize our living, is completely irrational in many ways. Until that is not understood, how can we solve poverty in the real form? Yeah.
So what was your personal journey into these insights, into these ideas of dignity and equity and justice and respect? What was your own personal journey into that?
No, I think one is, one incident, a particular incident, though, when I had gone to, in IIT is like a bhed bakri. I don't know. It's like what do you call it as, everybody writes to you, right? I came from Steel City, Rourkela, right? If you don't get to an IIT, like a lot of, before I come back home, my mother knows my math marks, right? It's a small town. You don't get to, everybody has to, the wicket keeper is talking to the batsman about what's the next question in IIT, right? The pressure, so you somehow get into IIT whether you're good or bad, right? The issue is, then you, right, GRE went to the US, but I had a chance to go to Dominican Republic, where there was this farmer, and had gone to do thinking large solar will solve India's problems, and this was in the 90s. And then I had this, in Dominican Republic, there was a Spanish farmer who showed me his own house, and he went inside and switched on the light 3 times and switched it off. And he said, do you know how it's run? I knew. And he said, solar. Nobody else controls it. I have the empowerment to do it when I need it. But then he said, I have a complaint against you Indians. You guys have done fantastic for US and Europe, but whenever I meet an Indian, always complains, this is not done, that is not done, government has not, never takes the blame on himself or herself that why I'm not doing it. He said, if India does not improve, Dominican Republic will not improve. Right? That, I came back to the US, I told my professor, boss, I don't want to do a PhD on thermodynamics, and nobody's going to read about it anyways. I have never felt what electricity is without. So I went to Sri Lanka and then stayed 2 years without electricity. So in Sri Lanka and India, without looking at solar, what is the basics? One is that, but one day when I was doing an exhibition in Puttur, and I was staying with, and everybody, there are 600 stalls, and everybody thought I was another laborer in one of my stalls. So I would put solar and sleep with them in the night. Last day, I had 2 of my American friends to come and see the stall from Bangalore. These guys noticed in the evening and said, "Who are they?" I said, "They're friends." "Oh, you are educated?" In 5 seconds, I lost 17 friends. Why? Next day, I took all my 3 degrees, bachelor's, master's, and PhD, took it to the fire and burned them. I have no degrees right now. Why does it make any sense? Right? Just because I had 2 white friends, I lost 17 friends with whom I had slept for 17 days. Why this? And that I'm still not able to understand, this hierarchy that we have created.
So what did that do for you?
Said that we'll create an organization which will not take resumes, which don't talk to me about degrees inside the organization. Outside. I don't care whether you're MIT or 4th grade dropout. I don't use which caste you are, that's all outside. You're going to do what is good for the sector, then the organization, and that's the same philosophy. Fortunately, both the organizations have followed a part of it, and a lot of my colleagues are ingrained in it much more than me. I mean, I've learned, I'm just one person, I've learned from all of them what inclusivity or inclusive, and what you spoke about, in the sense that it's until that inclusivity thinking does not come in, no? And what you're talking about, what she's talking about, we are like 0.002% of where we need to be. I'm on WhatsApp groups of the IT groups, and if you see that, we are far away from what you're talking about. Extremely far away. And when the so-called educated classes, right, it's until we break that thinking, and it's not how do we inculcate in the ego, and no school teaches you, unfortunately. It's not there. It's we survive on hierarchies. Who he's better than him. My organization is better than hers. We are in this beauty contest. And that needs to be destroyed. Social sector is the worst form.
Well, lots to continue to unpack, but I want to move to Chithra. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for a very personal sharing of that story. So Chithra, one of the things that Harish talks about is the ecosystem of support, right? And in your work, other than just the actual support that the family and the kid needs, over 15 years, have you seen an ecosystem building around this particular health condition? And what does that look like? Or is it still far away? Is it really just 1 or 2 organizations that are continuing to support this?
Yeah, unfortunately in India, at least so far, congenital heart disease has not got the awareness or is not as visible as it should be. I think cancer and other illnesses are more publicized, etc. In fact, I was shocked when I started, and many people asked me, "Oh, do children also get heart disease?" We thought it's something that older people get. So that is one aspect of our work which I'm still wanting to up, because there is, especially in the rural areas, there isn't much awareness about congenital heart disease. So what our work has done is we work only in the rural areas. All our kids come from rural areas to the city to get treated. Our doctors also go there to train the local doctors, who can do the simple diagnosis of, just by seeing the child, whether the child has some symptoms of congenital heart disease, or whether they can be trained to use the echocardiogram machine, etc. And to answer your question, yes, we are trying to help, develop an ecosystem where, at least least parents are aware that heart disease is also one of the, because it's not very well known that congenital heart disease takes away life for many children. It's the number one cause of infant mortality in India. And very few people are aware of that, and so our doctors felt that we should go to maternity hospitals, government hospitals, where day 2 or day 3 of the child's, after the child's birth, we do a free screening, and just to pick up the symptoms, because some of these defects need to be corrected in the first few weeks of the child's life. But the awareness is growing. There are Anganwadis and Balwadis which are being sensitized to watch out for symptoms of congenital heart disease and other disease. But it's a long way off, and we need to work very hard to bring about more awareness and also a treatment for this congenital heart disease.
So one aspect of running kind of a social organization is the solution itself, the products or services that you bring, the interventions that you bring. The second aspect is around when you start understanding the complexity of the issue, how do you start addressing some of the cultural factors, social norms around that challenge, right? Which is where you're talking about maybe awareness needs to come in around parents and the health sector, in the Anganwadi spaces, in the general public. One of the key pieces of the journey also is then how are you introducing new narratives, right?
Sorry?
New narratives into the space. So now this is a healthcare challenge. So are there questions around, could it be prevented? At what age could it be prevented? Is there enough research about this problem? Are there enough and more people now doing research about the problem if it's the number one cause for infant mortality? How are you contributing to maybe a policy level change? So are those conversations that you have within the organization, or again it seems far away?
No, it's absolutely part of our work. Our team of doctors are continuously working on research to, unfortunately or fortunately, there is less awareness, and the reason for congenital heart disease is not very well established. In fact, I had a child with congenital heart disease, and one of the reasons is when you marry within your cousins and there is a blood relation, so it leads to a heart defect. That's one of the reasons. Or when the mother during pregnancy had a major rubella or those kind of problems which led to this. So in terms of prevention, I don't know if there is much that can be done in congenital heart disease. We can only educate the mothers to have healthy diet and keep as good health as possible during the pregnancy. But for research, for early diagnosis and treatment, our team of doctors are all the time working. In fact, as we speak, we have a research project which is going on for early non-invasive diagnosis through a machine. And so our doctors are working with again IIT engineers in Chennai, and they are trying to bring which are low cost and can be used for wider diagnosis, etc. And also they are developing heart pumps which can be used and to save many more lives, and which will be affordable for Indian conditions. So there is a lot of work going on. As we know, cardiac work is the main work of any hospital, and I'm happy that to be associated with a group of doctors who are very much involved in these. We also have a very, we have a comprehensive kind of data management system. I have a data platform where all details of each patient is captured, and so we do data analysis, and we are trying to find out how we can, through actual costing, etc., work with the government and try and bring policy changes, because the government is giving an insurance amount which is just not practical at all. So we are trying to tell them that we need to, we want to show them what are the actual costs so that they can also consider giving us a better amount so that these surgeries are feasible and we are able to treat many more children.
Thank you for sharing that. So Meghana, you chose to take up a very complex issue with high levels of resistance in society. They're deep-rooted mindsets, they're deep-rooted stereotypes around the challenge that you chose to address. So are there moments where you have self-doubt, or moments where you're frustrated and you wish something was different?
Like, you want to hear only about today or all 4 years?
Let's start with today.
I was actually reflecting when Harish was sharing, right? I think definitely, Harish, I see and I agree with you, the blame that we place at the educational institutions. I also worked in educational nonprofits, right, for a long time. But I think the real thing that I am seeing as a huge blocker of any of our work, it is a mindset problem. And the mindset starts at home. Right? Like, you will have separate vessels for your house help. There are some people who can be abused even physically and in other ways in the house without question, right? We saw so much of this and it was so heartbreaking during the pandemic. So we started this free trust bot on WhatsApp, because what we realized is a lot of the victims of domestic violence were not able to call the helplines during the day, because now the abuser is at home. It's only at night when they're asleep, they can open WhatsApp and have like a confidential chat. And we also have like SOS modules. So, we work with other nonprofits like Sahas who'll come in, book your flight tickets for you and your kids, get you out of the house with the police, things like that, right? So I think there is a lot of work to do, but the biggest stumbling block is the mindset, because in the end, the people who are powerful, and many times when we think of power, we think of gender, we think of manager subordinate, but there are also softer forms of power, right? So somebody with higher socioeconomic status, even in the office, they have a better network. Somebody who has a longer tenure in Celco, for example, like, they will have a lot more power than a fresher, right? So I think some of these things are also, they can be so abused, and unfortunately when it's so normalized within our primary relationships and our primary safe space, we start thinking this is the way the world is. I'm being abused by somebody above me, I'm going to take and vent that out on somebody below me. So I think, I don't know, it's not that I expect an answer to this question, but that is something that gets me jaded all the time, because it's like, where is the end in sight then, right? It's not a policy problem, it's not a product solution that's going to solve it. But I do have a fantastic team. We're very small, very close-knit. I think one of the things about Bangalore is that it's very hard to recruit and retain great talent, because we can never compete with like venture capital funded companies. You really have to have a bleeding heart for this problem. You have to believe that you're making a difference. So I think that's the way we look at the people that we get in and the people who stay with us. So that gets me out of bed. But it is very difficult. It's a very complex situation. It keeps evolving. Like, we see a lot of ways in which sexual harassment and casteism intersect. So now we almost know when we're getting complaints saying I'm being bullied, right? After a while, if the committee is not doing anything about it, many times it does go into sexual harassment as well, right? When we ran some pilots in Singapore, we were seeing how racism was intersecting with sexual harassment there, because it was almost like the Chinese middle managers. There was a lot of racism against the Indians, Malays, and Thais. So it's a very complex, intersectional problem. It's international, it's insidious. It's a pandemic that's not going away anytime soon. So I think sometimes it is easy to say that, what is even the point? Because it seems that we're just making incremental progress for a very big problem.
So what do you say to yourself when you have moments like that?
I mean, I think, again, that's where I give all the credit to my team. You know, like, in the end, I am responsible for multiple people's, like, livelihoods. They have thrown their hat in the ring when they really didn't have to. So I think many days that is what gets me out of bed. Once in a while, we will hear from survivors who have used our products. You know, there'll be, like, a founder who reaches out and says that, you know, one of them recently was literally, they're a health tech company. So she was comparing Trustin to like an ECG. She's like, I don't have to wait for a heart attack, right? Because of your anonymous surveys, it's almost like we can have the finger on the pulse of our culture. And I really love that analogy. I'm like, we're going to use it in our marketing copy. But because we have grown so slowly and so intentionally, I do think our clients are such a major source of inspiration and validation for us as well. They don't leave us year on year, they come back. And I think that trust also just keeps us going.
Thank you. We'll probably move to the audience now, but before we kind of take some questions from you, if you have, and maybe questions or reflections, maybe you could just take a pause. And I think what Chithra, Harish, and Meghana have almost invited us to think about is how are we showing up in society, with our own mindsets, with our own prejudices, with our own stereotypes. And how do we perpetuate some of these hierarchies that Harish has talked about? So maybe just take a moment to reflect on that before we can open it up to questions and reflections. Okay, we could open it up now. If anyone has any questions, tell us who the question is for and try to keep it short and crisp so we could have more conversations. And if you have reflections, that's great too. Yes.
It's a really basic question of Meghana. I'm curious, you said you began with Teach for India, and then you've worked for a venture capital, and then you segued into working with Posh. I mean, this is highly legal work that you do, and it doesn't sound, I'm sorry, I came late, so I don't know if you have a legal background. So how does that work? I mean, I'm just trying to connect the dots, and I'm not able to, so I'm very curious.
Yeah, there's a question my parents are still asking themselves. I actually, I graduated from Berkeley. Like, I had a degree in cancer biology. So I thought that's what my life would be. Like, I always wanted to be a teacher, professor. I mean, the trite but true thing is I like solving complex problems. I think, I was raised by grandfathers very much with that ethos of you have a lot of privilege and go and build something in the world. That's your legacy, right? I came into Teach for India quite accidentally in that, a lot of my friends were doing Teach for America. And I saw their tremendous growth as humans as they battled whatever they battled in their classrooms. So the minute I saw the Teach for India, I was like, anyway, I love teaching. So I told my parents, 2 years, and then I'll look very good on grad school applications, and then I'll get a PhD. I mean, they're still waiting. So I think once you get into that work, you can see how much impact one person has. My co-fellows and I set up a non-profit. It's called the Sunrise Community Center in Pune. It's still existing. It's being run by the women of the community, right? So once you get a taste of that, I think it's intoxicating. Like, I was part of the Teach for India founding group, and then I started building more edtech products, right? And that's when I started realizing that I think when it comes to impact, if you look at programs, it can only grow. It can't scale, right? Almost every training depends on the mindsets of the trainers or the teachers who's standing in front of you. But if you look at products, you can scale impact without dilution. So that's where I really started thinking, okay, maybe not program, maybe product, which is what really led me to that VC firm. So I was leading the program there, looking at entrepreneurs, how they build companies, all of that. I think in the early part, I was also talking about how I'm a very accidental entrepreneur. Like, when the Me Too movement hit, I was just looking at how technology can solve this problem. So humans don't have to take the brunt of it. And sort of Trustin was born because people wanted to to use this product in their companies.
Maybe we could take a set of questions and then we could respond. Yeah. Go ahead. No, please.
I'm Changemakers. I'm maker of natural water purifier given to close to 4 lakh households past 10 years and without any trader dealer network. The next challenge is who has the fire in the belly like you? How do you give it to a successor or make it as an institution? The biggest challenge we are facing. Because whoever you take the best, let us say from top institutions, give them all the feed and give them all the best things you can give. No guarantee that they can take the mantle up and go further. So that is what really bothers us. So I want a real answer from you how to institutionalize this and take it forward. Even though I am not there, the message or the social work has to carry a part. So that's one thing intrigues me. So I want to have a frank opinion and answer from you.
We'll take a couple more questions and then we'll.
So my question is for Harish. I really resonated with when you said that everybody wants nobody wants Gandhi in their house. They want someone else to do it for them. So since you've been through this journey, would you have any advice for people who want to sort of or who are already in the sector? I come from a very progressive family and come from a lot of privilege. But despite that, there is this sense with friends and family that why do you have to be this idealistic person and let someone else do it, and why are you trying to get us to change our lives because you care about the planet or you care about not giving into the patriarchy and stuff like that. So how does one then deal with it if at all? Thanks.
There's one more question here and we'll take.
This is a two-parter. One was for Meghana and one was for the rest of the panel. I mean, everybody in the panel. The first was with trust in how do you manage privacy concerns with people? Even if the appetite stuff is relatively transparent, there's obviously that sort of like resistance to people trusting something that they can't really see. It looks like a black box to them without the technical training they have. And the second to the panel is when interfacing with stakeholders outside the organizations, majorly government and like CSR wins and corporates, what have your experiences been, and like what change would you like to see from either the state in terms of policy implementation or CSRs in how they deal with social enterprise?
Thank you. So we have a set of questions. Do you want me to repeat them? We've got questions. So maybe Chithra and Harish, you could take the question around succession planning and institutional building. Go ahead, Harish.
No, what you asked is very critical, where from day one is somewhere you have to start from day one, sir, in terms of redundancy, that how does one become redundant. See, in 2008, after 14 years in Celco India per se, 2009, 2 or 3 of us had decided that we will leave because we said the actual work is done by my grassroots colleagues. We are just taking the credit off. It has to be. So 2009 and 11, 2 of my colleagues stepped back, Thomas with Homer. I stepped back in 2012, out completely. And by the time Mohan took over so a lot of resistance. You had foreign shareholders. I mean, all the foreign not-for-profits. How will he share? Boss, I mean, it's a question. We'll have a translator in middle, right? Kannada, so what? Translated, I'll think. And frankly, sir, after myself and Thomas stepped back, the organization started to do better. Much, much better. So we were joking like we should have left earlier. Right? Same way in Celco Foundation, actual 99% of the work is actually done by Huda Rachita. Right? So that, and hardly I'm involved in operational, a bit of strategy here and there. That's what I keep comfort, I'm actually providing some value. They might not think otherwise. Might be thinking, why is this guy coming uselessly to office every day? But that we started from day one. We are close. Karna hai. It has to be done. It has to be somebody that you start becoming redundant. Good. That is a very conservative organization. foundation, the first one that we left. The second one is average age is 31. We have 250 of them. And Hudas and Rachitas. But from day one, we were very clear. This has to be a 5-year journey for us, or 6 years, maximum 8 years. But somebody has to be taking over the philosophy. And the second question to your question was, I really don't care what other, in a sense. So a lot of the youngsters come and said, my parents are there. I think if you really want to do the work, don't care. Right? When you're falling in love, do you care for your parents? Oh, boss, us samay to nahi hai. Right? So there are people who come and say, Celco mein aane se ladki nahi milega, sir. Is that your problem in life? Right? The question for me is that if you truly want to fight the fire, I tell the youngsters, boss, okay, if it's still not, tell me, I'll talk to your parents. Right? But I would say if you really suck up, I would. There are other people I'll change. Let me change the other parts to it. I had a little easier time because my parents were more concentrated on my sister, who was much more problematic. And so I had a much better time. Like, she suddenly stole a Hande, calls me up and said, Harish, convince parents I'm going to Afghanistan. And she hangs up the phone and I don't hear from her for 2 weeks. So they had a much bigger problem to deal with. And in the meantime, I got away.
So
Yeah.
And maybe his question around CSR and working with governments.
Yeah. We have been working with the government from day one, and since I went as an NGO, I was welcomed everywhere. But the moment I mentioned the hospital that I'm working with, they had reservations. So for the longest time, I just put our NGO in the front so that we were able to swing this. So now it's quite in fact we have kind of set a trend. Other private hospitals in Chennai at least are trying to copy the model that we started, and they are approaching the government to be allowed to do screening and treat the children from different districts. It's been good to deal with the government and get their support, because a lot of corporates are happy if you're working with the government in some way, and it gives more credibility to the NGO if you're associated with some of the government schemes, etc. And the corporates, I must say, they have been super supportive. I think they are the backbone of my work, and of course they all have their own mandates. Each corporate has their own CSR mandate. So there is a lot of paperwork and due diligence, and we have to be completely transparent, which is very good, I think. And so it's a lot of work with each corporate that we work with, and they have social audit. They have their own private social audits which they conduct, and which is also good for us. And when they get a good platinum grade or some gold grade based on the support that they are giving Aishwarya Trust, it's very heartwarming and meaningful for us. So regarding my succession plan, actually I started because I was passionate about the cause, but I'm very delighted that the whole group with whom I work, they are equally passionate about this, and we have youngsters in our fray, and many of them are volunteers. And also I feel now there are many organizations who are willing to take up the work of any one NGO and run the admin work, because this is like 24/7, 365 days. It's a continuous for 15 years. There's not been a break. So this is how it is, and I'm sure it will continue the same way.
Now you want to take the question on privacy?
Sure. I think one thing I also want to point out about the funding piece, right? I feel like there's never been a better time in history to be an entrepreneur, right? I think my dad is a first-gen entrepreneur. I mean, his business partner is right here. Like, they built a construction company, then they built a hospitality company. When I started working for a venture capital accelerator, my dad was like so confused by the concept. He's like, so you give them money? I'm like, yes. Then he thought for some time. He was like, you give them office also? I'm like, yeah, they work in this co-working space. He's like, and you introduce them to clients also? I'm like, yes. He's like, then why they're all not succeeding? Like, why are they all not runaway successes? He just couldn't believe it, right? And I think with this whole 3 Ps triple bottom line, like, the people, profit, planet, or the ESG guidelines, or impact investing, there's just never been a better time to be a social entrepreneur as well. Like, okay, maybe a lot of it is virtue signaling, right? But it is still, at least people are asking some of these questions now. So I think, like, we were very lucky to get a grant from the government of Karnataka, the Elevate pitch. And I think that is the only reason we survived the first year of the pandemic, right? So I think very grateful for that. And apart from being bootstrapped, we have a couple of grants like that. I think in terms of the security, right, that is something we take very seriously. So I think there's 2 levels. One is the technological level, and the second is the legal level. So we have, encryption for our data. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not very technical, but we have a document on our website that clearly lays out all the protocols at every level, how we're handling the data from the chatbot, and how we're handling the data for the case, right? On the second level, legally, we also make sure that our contracts are very watertight. So we also can't access the data unless there is written permission from each of the clients, specifically also telling us why we have to access their data and when. So I think between this, and we also, I mean, obviously it's an ongoing process, but during our sensitization programs, we try to foster that trust that, hey, please come forward, and the product will make sure that you are safe.
Are there another round of questions?
I have one.
Yes, please.
This is for Harish. Harish, it's a very simple one. This whole IIT IIM brigade in this country and generations of it, right? It is just almost impossible to just get that out of the way. But if you look at our country, non-IIT, non-IIM successes, either in the corporate world or in the social impact ecosystem that we're part of, is tremendous, right? How do we tell that story better so that you can really then not talk so much about IITs and IIMs? It's just baffling, and this is also a personal question. I am not an IIT IIM grad. I spent 30 years in the Tata Group. Every day that I said I work here to somebody who didn't know me, they would be, oh, which IIM did you pass out of? Which year did you pass out of? Which year TAS are you? Forever. For 30 years I have this question with me, but I'm not one, How do you, is it going to be generations before we get rid of it? How do we tell the story of the non-IITs better?
Probably take a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Janali, and good to see Vishal after a long time as well. And so my question is actually somewhat similar to what you just asked, and actually this was one question that Dipankar and I were also talking the other day about, so if India is such a large country with so many problems, and there are so many solutions that are required, and of course, the size and the nature of the problems is baffling, right? But how many change makers, the number of change makers that are required is probably still, maybe it's now increasing. Like she said, it's a good time, yes, but I think it's been a slow climb. So do you think there's a systemic change in the way of education? For example, liberal arts. We did not have liberal arts in our education system as a university being offered for a very long time, until some time back. And also, yes, the cream of the society, all the ones who go to the IITs and IIMs, I think there is a great potential there to be offered a liberal arts program for them to be aware of what this country needs and what kind of changes or transformation the country requires. So do you feel that as well? I think it's almost like, I don't know what you think about it, but do you think that it's something that can be, or should be done in the higher higher education system, if not earlier. I mean, it would be better if it actually was there right from the school system. And is that going to be sort of a change in the way changemakers are looked at or encouraged, or or get the support they need in their journeys?
Thank you. I think there are two more here.
This is a question to Meghana. POSH is prevention of sexual harassment. So could you elaborate a little bit more about the prevention aspect? Because the way I understood the tool was that after the incident has occurred, people use it to report and keep track of the evidence. So could you elaborate on the prevention aspect?
Sure.
And then second question is for Madam of Aishwarya Trust. So there are a lot of these websites that ask for donations because they have a lot of cases where people require medical operations and then they solicit donations. So what is your opinion for donors? Like how should they approach these websites? Can they be trusted?
I think Geeta had
This is for Harish. You have built an organization which kind of reduces inequities and brings about. But you're so passionate about it. This really has to set in at the educational system. So have you ever thought of working with the education system to see how this can be kind of not allowed to happen at all, apart from the family influences? So model educational programs.
Okay. I think there's one more question, so we'll take that last question. And we're just on time then. So.
Chithra ji, I really appreciate, of course, others also your work. My question is, we are both are from an institution called Healthy Hearts Association. Whenever there is some need is there, we look at Jaideva Hospital and Dr. Manjunath. Like that, any hospital where such cases can be directed, wherein they will be supportive and they will look for aid and treat the child.
So it looks like there are a bunch of technical questions. So maybe you can take those and then we'll take the more mindset shift questions, if you don't mind. So Chithra, maybe you could go first. One is the question that gentleman asked around donations.
So crowdfunding has become a big part of medical care because, very often the child is already admitted in the hospital and we need the fund immediately. And if we are not able to, find the funding, the surgery cannot happen. So, we also support heart transplant, which is costs close to 18 to 20 lakhs per transplant. So for these cases, we very often need to use the crowdfunding, portals, and some of them have become very professional and they are doing a good job. However, my personal experience has been that whenever I have posted one of our kids on the crowdfunding portal, my donors have come back to me saying that I'd rather just give it to your organization because they take 20% of what. But I think it is still important to have these crowdfunding areas, which is an alternate way of raising also quick money. To answer your question, sir, I'm happy that you're supporting a lot of children with heart disease. I support also a hospital here, which is the Manipal Sarjapur Road branch. So if you have any children, you can send them there and we will be supporting. Of course, in Chennai, I have the MGM hospital where I work, and in Coimbatore, I have a couple of hospitals. So I would suggest you can go to my website and you can get in touch with us, and we can help you out either in Bangalore or in Chennai or Coimbatore, anywhere.
question on prevention?
Yes. So the Posh law says 3 words, right? Prevention, prohibition, and redressal of sexual harassment. So as you said, redressal right now happens through the committees in your company, or you can go to the local committee of the district where the sexual harassment occurred. So if you're a domestic worker, if you're a freelancer, you don't have a committee or a company, you can still get justice. In terms of prevention and prohibition, it's very clear. So prevention is awareness sessions happening annually, right? Because again, then everybody becomes aware, what are the boundaries, what is consent, what is appropriate, inappropriate, you align together. And prohibition is through having a policy and posters. So technically, if you have 10 or more paid employees in India, you have to have a poster saying that, hey, we have a zero tolerance policy towards sexual harassment. Here is our committee member list. Here is how you can reach them, right? So all of these are mandated by the law.
Thanks for, first I'll take both. See, I mean, I don't know, my views of IITs have been, it's been one of the most useless institutions. They're basically one exam wonders. You one exam, IIT is not about engineering. We get an engineering degree, but we don't become engineers, right? So you get into IIMs, which are further away from the problem. I'm not degrading them that way. I mean, it's that if the same amount of subsidies was given to the ITIs and the vocational schools of our country, a lot of the problems could have been solved, right? Because the kids who come to these institutions, to the ITIs and the root cities and all, come with the problem statement, because they have actually looked at it from the house perspective. This is what problem my father had, my mother had, the farming. If you take a survey of all the ITIs and the root cities, you get all of India's problems in the need space, in the power set. Why can't we make them the partners, create innovation labs of failure, come and fail here in ITI, right? Let's take, how many of us will take a risk on an ITI? But because somebody is an IIT and I'll take a risk, and if he fails, the market fails, not him. If the poor ITI kid fails, he has failed, right? If we, Germany succeeded because of vocational schools. If the fundamentals of US is based on vocational schools, we need to reframe it in a manner, what you said, how do we create these innovations, lab innovations of failures in the ITIs and the root cities. We are now created a hierarchy, ITI, REC, IIT, right? It should be, I want to go into ITI or I want to go into IIT. It has to be a plain field. And that is when your mindset change will happen. And my question to IITs is, simple thing, I did 2, one with Kharagpur I no longer work with, is when I said, boss, I'll do a competition of creating a particular solution for, come up with 5 solutions, I'm going to put in the money from technical solution, provided it's you are able to have a 4-member team, boys or girls, 2 from IIT and 2 from ITI, from local ITI in Kharagpur. Do you know the professors call me and says, don't you think there will be intellectual difference? I called up and said, क्यों IIT का exam down हो गया क्या? Right? This racism comes from there, right? That thought process. And that will change. So it's no point touching the 13 IITs. Let them do what they want in terms of the IIT. We need to relook at even requesting the CSRs not to, at least not jump into that bandwagon, right? Start populating the ITIs, the students, the root cities, the alternative education system that exists. And that is where the mindset is. Let's pick up 100 ITIs, not much. 100 ITIs. Create centers of innovation and incubation. Put money into that. 95% let it fail. That 5% will change. That's exactly what happened in the agricultural revolution. The ITIs changed the whole agricultural system of our countries, not the IITs. So if you ask all the directors, tell me one product that IITs did for rural India, they cannot name it. One. I'm not asking for 2.
I can tell you.
No, but sir, if you're telling one, it's also like very scary, right? That's where I'm saying, okay, how do we, and that will change if we start looking respectfully at the ITIs. But today, we are de-skilling them, the ITIs, and saying that they will work for us, for the corporate sector. And training it. No, I don't want them to be trained. They have to be innovators and incubators, and then this automatically will change in a country like ours. Germany has shown, we need to look at it. Yeah.
So I'm going to close with a quick comment from each of you. When will you know your work is done?
When will I know my work is done? I mean, never, in a sense. I mean, see, I hope I conk off while working. And the question is, it's a continuous. If Celco, the Celco Foundation should kill itself by 2032. With the present set of problems, we are saying 2032. And if the next generation takes a new problem and does 10 times better than it, we are very happy that we have succeeded. That's where we're.
So my work will never end as long as children are born and many of them need treatment. We will need many, many more Aishwarya Trusts to help.
Yeah, I think the goal of trust in is to not exist, right? Because why should we help somebody get the courage to come forward? Why should we tell committees how to do the work? Why should we tell people what is appropriate, inappropriate? So ideally, it should be a society where we don't need to exist. And I think it should also be a society where everybody feels empowered to take a stand for what is right. You know, break this racism, hierarchical thinking. If I can, I'd just like to read a quote that really resonated with me. I think I couldn't stop thinking about this quote in 2018, and that's when I'm like, I'm going to build something, even if I have no idea how I'm going to do it. So it's by a Nobel Peace Prize winner called Elie Wiesel. He is a Jew, right? And his quote is quite famous. You might have heard of it. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. And I think as we see, right, these inequities, capitalism, patriarchy, fascism, I think it just rings more and more true. So once we have a society that moves towards that, then I think trust will not need to exist.
Beautiful. Thank you again. Thank you, Harish, Chithra, Meghana. And thank you for being an engaged audience. And I do hope that, Harish, Chithra, and Meghana, in their sharing, have provoked you to think about some of your own mindsets. As a citizen, as a human being, in the ways you show up at home, in family, in society, and work. So I hope it's been reflective for all of you. Thank you again.
Thank you.